I've been to the Ark a few times, and I know that the demography of the church is predominantly, well, largely a lot of young people there. Now, do you ever have conversations with young people that feel targeted by the police? And if so, what do you say to them?
I think similar to what Leroy just said, like what I say to my kids. I mean, you may know my testimony. I got in trouble with the law as a teenager. All the time I was in police stations, and all the time I was getting beaten up by police. So I've had the whole police brutality. But when I sit back now and think about it, as an older person, I realized the reason why they were beating me up is because I was giving it hard to them. Do you know what I mean? And if they pulled me up, I had attitude, so now I've learned, like, if I'm driving and I've, maybe since I've been saved, maybe 3 or 4 times I've been pulled over by the police. When I do get pulled over by police, I am the most respectful, courteous. I'm like, yes, sir, no, sir. I've taught that to my children. Like, I just be respectful. And I hope that I've been able to say that to our young people at the Ark. Some of them, like, as you know, back 15 years ago, we had an influx of lots of young people, and they were in their teenage life. Now these guys are like 30, 31. They're settled down, got their children now, married. I've seen them through university, married them, seen them having their children. But I remember back then, like, one young man I remember in particular, he lived in Maryland and have to come to Forest Gate for service. And the amount of times he got robbed on his way, it was ridiculous. Just, got held up, etc. And then we had some of our young men, obviously coming from other places, coming to church in Forest Gate, and would get stopped on their way to church. And then they would come to church a bit traumatized. And then we had to talk to some of them through the issues. Like, just for some of them, it was the way they were dressed. Do you know what I mean? Back then, they had their hoodies on, their trousers down. And so we had to kind of address that. But then they were saying, and I understood what they were saying, like, the kind of dressing like that kind of, I don't have to what word, it made the other guys think that I better not play with them, I better not mess with them. Do you know what I mean? So they were less likely to get robbed by guys on the street if they looked a certain way. But then it made them more likely to get pulled over by the police if they were dressed like that. So there was in a little, so we had to kind of navigate them through that, how to, talk to them about their future, how you want to, the kind of job, you're not going to get it dressed like that and walking like that and carrying. So we had to kind of talk them through just carrying themselves a certain way and dressing a certain way and presenting themselves a certain way. If they're going to, because the truth reality is the system is made for whites. And if you're a black person going to make it, then you're going to have to learn how to navigate through that. You know what I mean? Until the system changes, you're just going to have to know how to carry yourself. You're going to have to know how to speak, how to dress. And that. So that's kind of some of the things that we would go through with the young people. Of course, a lot of the young people in church are they're more millennials. They're more interested in relationships at the moment. So we're dealing with a lot of that. But yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah. Thank you for that. But on the back of the point that you made, I'm going to ask Pastor Shola a question. And I've observed it myself, we say that when you're dealing with the police, you have to be, respectful, cautious and all that, which, in my view, that should be normal response, regardless of whether they're police officers or not. Mm-hmm. So why, Pastor Shola, why should we have to go that extra mile in dealing with police officers?
Yeah, yes. So, I mean, I'll just add my views to what Pastor Peter and Leroy have said, and they both made really great points, which is it's actually good to hear an ex-police officer, say that he tells his kids that, look, be careful how you handle the police, watch your tone, blah 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 blah, because that's what I tell my kids. So, I would have thought, your kids were immune to that. And it's also interesting to also hear, Peter, if I was an ex-policeman, I'd just say, look, tell them your dad is a police officer, and that should put them right. But I mean, like anything in life, yeah, outside of even dealing with policemen, when you are polite, when you are calm, when you're gentle, you in a sense, take charge of the situation. The Bible says, be angry and sin not. The Bible also, talks about be slow to speak, yeah, quick to hear, slow to get angry. And there's something about, if somebody else is angry or provoked, or even feels like as though you're in the wrong, if you're gentle, you are calm, yeah, most human beings will calm down. And, so the whole idea is, so I don't know the full context of the George Floyd situation, but it'll be interesting to really see what happened, in detail. And like I said, I don't know what happened there, but you'll find that in some situations, it's an issue of maybe like resisting arrest or a provocation, or, I watched a video a few days ago about a policeman coming up to a black guy, a white policeman, asking him about his ID, that he looked like a suspect they were looking for. And then the guy started to insult that white, and that black guy could have been right. Apparently, I hear that he was probably an FBI agent or something to that effect. But the point is still, regardless, he was using the F word, the this, the that. And I thought the policemen around actually handled it in a calm way. My point is this, the black man could have been right, but if he was calm and just said, oh, look, excuse me, officer, there's no, but he was swearing, he was provocative. Now, in an instance where, say, perhaps maybe it's at night and he's the only one there, it would probably be a totally different thing, because it's his word against the other people's words. So, I mean, I tell my sons, I said, look, you can hardly go wrong if, people are on your case and you're, sorry, sir, just giving the right answers, gentle, and complying. Because if I'm stopped on the road, on the streets, I will do it precisely the same thing. It's just to avoid provocation. It is the same tactic that we use even at home in marriage situations and situations between parent and child. If I'm talking to my son and he's, it would take the temper up and the tempo up a bit, and you want to avoid that. But if you reply, yes, dad, okay, dad, blah blah blah, it's a different matter from, no, what do you mean? And you could end up anywhere with that. So it makes sense to be gentle, calm, respectful. That's until the system changes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
Just one of the best reference books I've ever used as a supervisor, because over 20 years of supervising police officers of various teams. My last job was the Olympics, 2012. And the best book I ever had, it wasn't around leadership, it's around child psychology. And how you deal, how you deal with your children. That's why with Pastor Solomon's talking about dealing with his children. It's a similar way how to deal with officers, not to talk down to them, but talk to them in a way that really sometimes have to use some reverse psychology on them and their whole emotional intelligence to touch if they got a reasonable strand in their heart or their brain or whatever, to touch on that, to say, listen, put yourself in someone else's shoes. And, for the child psychologist, you have to be in that child's shoes to understand how they operate. So I just thought I'd just add that quickly. So.
That's very helpful.
Do you remember the name of the book?
There's several. I think I can get them for you, but I haven't used them for about 10 years.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
yeah. I'll definitely. But most child psychology books are more or less the same.
Okay.
But no, I especially emotional intelligence. I think that's the best way to get the best out of people, and police officers are not excluded from that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you.
You're muted, Banks.
All right. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. Now we're actually going on to the cross questions. So I don't know, Pashala, you said you had a few questions for Leroy.
Yes, I have one or two for Leroy, and perhaps one for Peter if we do have the time. The uppermost question for me, I guess, is I've always been curious about the fact that as a Black police officer, in your experience when you were in the force, will you say Black policemen treated Black suspects the same way as the white ones, or were they more hostile? What I'm saying is that the black policemen also have stereotypes concerning black young men they meet on the streets. That would be an interesting one to know.
Well, it depends on that Black officer's experience before joining, because if they grew up in an urban setting in London, let's say,
yes,
and they knew the nuances, then invariably they got a way of reading it. Whereas if they grew up in a relatively white environment in, the Shires, and it's a leafy suburb or whatever, and they're not even used to Black people themselves, sometimes they can be even more assertive with Black people for several reasons. One, they don't know how to read that urban cult. They don't have the cultural intelligence, even though they have the same skin color, but they don't have the real cultural awareness. Because I can go up to Liverpool and try and police, and I can totally misread. Because I know London, I know how to read it so well. So, and that's the same with a Black officer from outside London trying to operate maybe in a busy area like your Lamberts or your Ilfords, those sort of places, Newham, those sort of places. You need to know what you're doing. So, and then the other thing is, as I said, when you're in a very closely knit team, you are going to make your own assessment. How far do I ingratiate myself with my colleagues? Now, if you're the sort of person that you come out of London, so you've moved into London, you don't have any immediate support network, you don't have any friends, your friendship group and your professional group, all are the same people. So as a result of that, you're going to be reliant more on them and you want to get on with them. Whereas if you've got quite I had the triple whammy. I was a Black Christian with attitude. So I didn't need to have a peer group. And I remember telling them, and first day in Hendon, I said to them, you have to go around the class. Why did you join the police? Oh, yeah, I want to keep the peace. I want to help people. I want to protect life and property. All of the standard lines, which sounds very good. And, and I want to work as a team. And I said, yeah, all that. I want to work with a team, but I haven't joined to make friends. I've come to be an officer. I'll work with everyone, but I'm not here to make friends because I want to keep my personal life and my professional life totally separate. I want to be meeting plumbers, decorators, entrepreneurs, barbers, hairdressers to keep me grounded. And you all know I've got a Nigerian wife, so she keeps me grounded anyway. So I don't need any other peer groups, actually. And she's still keeping me grounded almost 40 odd years later. But the important thing is, I didn't need that friendship group. Now, again, that didn't ingratiate me, but they knew where they stood. So don't rely on me to be laying in hard on my own people just to make me fit in with you. In fact, I would be saying, actually, let me deal with it myself. And I'll give you an example. One time, I was a sergeant then. I was in Hackney. I was in Ridley Market, for some of you might know that area, and I stopped this guy, and he was in a really intense. You could look at him and you knew he's got that look. You know, he's a guy, he's been in problems. So I did a check on the vehicle, and his face looked familiar. Check on the vehicle, and it came up flashing W, and they got certain code words. So if it flashes D, that means it's involved in drugs. If flashes W, means weapons. If it and it flashes F, it's firearms of one form or another. So they'll mention that. So sometimes, if you ever get stopped, hopefully not, if you hear any flashing of W, F, or D, then you're in trouble, huh? Anyway, so when the name on the registration number, I could hear people on the radio. So I put it on mute. And then the next minute, I'm hearing blue tones and everyone coming. I didn't ask for any assistance in that, because I knew he's the sort of guy that you raffle him and he's just going to kick off. That's going to be it. And anyway, they all turned up, and I said, I didn't ask for anyone. So could you just stay away? So he looked at me, and he realized that, you know, I wasn't chip off the old block of coppers, you know, because I was relating to him. Anyway, and when they came back with a check of his name, he's wanted. I said, listen, man, there's a warrant for your arrest. I've got to take you back. He said, okay. And I said, right, one of my officers is going to take your car back to the station, and you can drive with me. Well, my colleagues were going absolutely spare. You're not going to handcuff him, and you got him in the front seat next to you? But I just knew, I think my spirit man just read it. Right. Anyway, we get into the custody suite at Hackney. Stoke Newington Police Station. It's in the Hackney Borough anyway. And I said, listen, I've got to search you now. And he said, okay. And he had this thick trench coat, you know, the leather, long length trench coat. And out the back, he produced 2 firearms and put on the table. And when we examined, they had 2 in the spout.
Wow.
So this guy, well, anyway, God is good. There is a God. Honestly, and I said to him, when I put him in the cell, I said, sir, we're going to use that. He said, if anyone had touched me, and he was Jamaican, so I could relate to how to read him. And that's one of the things we find, that, you know, some of these yardie guys that come over here, he's actually from the old school yardie types. They'll shoot on sight in Jamaica if a policeman even look at them. Shoot on sight in certain areas. But they come over here and they're totally passive compared to what they are in Jamaica, because they adopt the culture. And it's the similar sort of thing. So it's showing respect to him and not going hard on him saved a lot of people getting injured, maybe shot or whatever, killed. And so I wasn't going to ingratiate myself with those colleagues to say, listen, put the cuffs on him, throw him in the van, because they might not have gone that far. We could have been all dead on the street. And so in answer to your question, some officers, depending on their experience, can be their worst nightmare. And we found that when we set up the Black Police Association, some of our black colleagues saying, why are you doing that? You're making it a lot tough for us. We can't get on with our white mates. I said, yeah, but you're thinking of yourself. But what about the greater good and and not just black members of staff in the organization, but the black community. So, you know, you just need to be strong in your own values and your beliefs. And my reference book was the Bible. So I had no choice. I had to speak up and be counted.
Good. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Leroy. Right. So, Pastor, I know you have one more question. I'm just conscious of the time.
Yeah, go on.
No, but Pastor, go on. You've got a question for Pastor Peter.
Yes. Well, I mean, my question for Pastor Peter is actually a simple one, and I'm not sure if he's already answered it. But I wanted to find. I know, like myself, you didn't have, you know, a docile, gentle past. Yeah, I know you came from the streets and all of that. So, I mean, can you just give one of your experiences that you think, you know, might speak into this whole thing? You know, maybe one where you were actually, you know, provocative, or one where you were passive. you know, just so that we can learn from the experience. I mean, Leroy gave one that was, you know, kind of like really helpful.
Well, I was thinking as Leroy was speaking.
Yes.
I was thinking back. I'm not sure how long ago Leroy was policeman, but I remember when I was on the street, there was a policeman, and he was black, and he was the only one, and we just taunted him and tormented him when we saw him. He was Judas. I don't even know his name, but he was. And every time he passed,
that's my middle name as well. Yeah.
But we just shouted Judas at him and just abused him all the time, you know. So whenever we would get arrested, he was a little bit harder than the rest of them on us, because I think we were just not great with him, you know, as youth. But I remembered a few years back. So I've been saved now, maybe I'm saved 33 years. So I would say now it's about 14 years ago. So this is now like 18 years later. I'm in Forest Gate, and all these police come up, and this policeman jumps out. This 18 years later, and he looks over me and he said, "Hey, effing members." And it was him. It was Judas. So when he finished doing all that they were doing, he came over and started asking me my story, and it was really good to stand with him and have a conversation with him and share with him my change, my transformation and everything, you know. And this, actually see him now as a human, see him as someone doing his job, you know. And it was just a different experience. But we abused black officers more than we did the white officers.
Actually, very short story. The chief executive of Voyage Youth was my worst nightmare when I was a rookie cop in the early 80s. And he was the same thing. I was patrol up Holloway Road, and he was always calling me Judas. And he always wanted me to run after him. And too many little cronies on Highwood Fields, that was sport for them, to wind up the officers and go running, and they could never catch them because they knew all the back alleys and everything. And I knew that. And I used to just have banter with them. And I never arrested them. I just had banter. And in the end, 30 odd years later, I'm working with him on my charity. So you know how these things can end up.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Any other question?
The question I want to ask, this whole thing that's happened, as I said earlier, I really do believe that 2020 is the year of clarity, and it's a lot of the things that are happening are that we can see clearly. And yeah, this thing's happened in the middle. So I'm wondering, is this whole protesting, I'm kind of feeling like there's a lot of politics in this thing. Like, it's not just simply about what's happened to George, but there's a lot of politics going on. So I don't know who that question is for, Pastor Shola or Leroy. Yeah.
Well, let me just kick off by saying that I've been over in the States on numerous occasions. I've patrolled with black officers, and race is very front and center because of slavery and Jim Crow and the various graphic historical, even to the extent of assassinating Martin Luther King and all the high-profile killings. Not just necessarily police officers, but members of the public. Trayvon Martin is another example. And what I found is that race is on their sleeve. They walk around it every day, and they're very segregated as well. And they don't in any way compromise, especially black people. They're very, very clear on their color, and they sometimes, and I think in a lot of ways, they suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome in a massive way. And I'm not saying that's just an excuse, but I see it how they not only approach their profession, but their interactions with the police, and it's not always they're being assertive and aggressive, but you know, it's like it's in their DNA. Everything they do, race is got an impact one way or another, and I think it's because they haven't had that real conversation around race and identity, and until they have that, I think it's a bit of restoration they need to go through. And I think your point, Peter, is very important about 2020 being a year of clarity, because I think COVID has brought in that clarity about our values as individuals, our home. You know, I went to the Black Lives Matter march on Wednesday. You know, it's the first time I've left my house in 3 months. And I'm not, you know, a special case. I have to be shielded. I've been walking around, I know every blade of grass in Epping Forest at the moment because I've walked it. And because, you know, social isolating and everything. So, but I wanted to go to that in solidarity of not only George Floyd, but the Black lives that have been injured, sometimes life-changing, and also the fact that they've passed away over here. And it's the Black Lives Matter UK chapter. I went in solidarity. And I just wanted to see if it's got the same political nuance. And I don't think it is. I think it's a real struggle for their blackness to be recognized, but not because of necessarily slavery, but the journey of identity. And I think it's even more difficult if you're from the Caribbean or Africa and you've grown up here and you've never been back to Africa or back to the Caribbean. Because I know my identity when I went to Jamaica as a school child and I came back and finished my education. That's the biggest identity foundation for me. In fact, my spiritual home is Jamaica. My economical home is here. And I see a lot of people over here, especially young people who haven't traveled back to the homeland, wherever it may be, they haven't got that grounding. But it's not because they are subject to racism. It's identity. Whereas over in America, it is seriously, race is it's a big R and it's a big P, political.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question, Peter.
Yeah. Can I briefly just add something to that, to what Leroy said, and to answer Peter's question, just very briefly. And I agree 110% with Leroy, but I would also add that I believe that there's also a political element to it. Mm-hmm. So, like what Leroy said, the trauma from racism, slavery, blah blah blah, and also a pile-up of issues over time. The recent guy that was hunted and gunned down, there are so many others over time that, people are frustrated and there's a build-up. But like anything in life, it starts off with the right intention, then people get on it and, push it to their own agenda. There definitely has been an added layer of politics on it. Because, hey, let's remind ourselves, the presidential candidacy is in view in America, and so you'll find that there have been various machineries in place to ride on that storm, and but it's normal. It's not, but I would not say it's not purely political. So, but I believe the underbelly intention is clearly a sensitivity to the issue of the frustration of slavery and racism over the years. And like Leroy said, on this side, probably identity issues, especially with the millennials. They are very, very in injustice and inequity conscious. And so, whether black or white, it's a rallying point for a lot of young millennials. Hence the thing at the High Park.